Good morning. My name is Mike Wright, and today's subject on our monthly webinar is incoming email. Now, I'm going to talk about the capabilities and best practice of this particular feature of Issuetrak and hopefully give you some information that maybe you've overlooked or maybe you don't know that exists within the product in order for you to take emails and create issues. Well, let's start this out by going back a little bit and saying, well, who are you? Well, my name is Mike Wright. As I said, I am a senior product engineer at Issuetrak. I've been here for over 20 years. I have over 30 years of experience in retail and customer support, a bachelor's degree in business management from Virginia Tech, and an associate's degree from a technical college in software programming. So I've worked in several different departments here at Issuetrak. I have a lot of experience that I try to bring to all of this. And what I do is I configure sites and I teach people how to use the software product. And hopefully many of you have either heard of me or have worked with me as I've done jump starts with you over the last 10 to 15 years. So let's go ahead now and kind of get started, get into the meat and potatoes of this thing. So where we're going to start with is an email. So the idea many years back was for Issuetrak to process emails, because originally when it was created, it didn't have the capability to process an email into an issue. You had to log into the website in order to process everything. So what we wanted to do then was give you the capability for you to create issues from that as emails. So we created this after hearing from our customers. So what do? We take an email and we create an issue from it. So here's an email that we just saw. And this is the issue that was created from that particular email. So let's take a look at some of the pieces that we're looking at and how it actually goes into Issuetrak. Well, first thing, if we look at the email, whenever you send an email in, you have an email address. So you're sending it to and from. So the from email address is this one, mike.wright@issuetrak.com. Well, then Issuetrak said, okay, the submitting user is called the accountant. Well, how did it get to the accountant user if I send it in from mike.wright@issuetrak.com? That's because as we process the email, we try to match the email address associated with a user account. So this is the user account that I found this email address in. Now, if it happens to be more than one email address or more than one user account with that same email address, it's going to process the first one it finds. That's what it's going to do. And sometimes it'll be one and sometimes it'll be another. So usually your user accounts only need one email address. That's usually what you want to use. So accountant user is going to be my submitting user. I'm going to pull the operations organization from the user profile here and put it into the issue record. And I'm going to go down and pull the locations information from the user record and put that into the issue. So now I have a submitted user. So that's how I get the user information into the issue. It's directly from that email address. Next thing, I'm going to go ahead and have a subject line. What's this all about? What's my problem? What am I requesting? What do I need? So here it says MFG quality complaint. That's the subject line. So when I go back to my issue and I look, there it is, MFG quality complaint. So I've taken the information from the subject line and put it into the subject of my issue. Now, I'm going to explain to you what we do, but basically what we're trying to do is derive information from that line in order to categorize and to process this issue. Now, I'll show you that in just a minute, but ideally here, that's what you're going to do. Now, other things that's in here is the descriptor. The description now, or the body of the email, contains information. Now, pay attention to this line because you're going to see that here in the description line. Now, I personally have, just for clarification, I have stripped out the signature line that you saw in the email. So I have personally done that. So that way it makes it cleaner for you to look at. Here's an example. Now, here, so now you see the subject, the description, the actual issue was put into an issue type called quality assurance, and it came over as a class of CAPA and quality. It even has auto-assigned it to the quality manager, and then it also loaded in tasks in here. Now, why would it do that? Well, let's take a look at how an email box is set up and how all of these things we've just talked about occur. First thing we do is we go to administration and then incoming email, and we'll end up on this page. Now you'll notice first off here that there are two mailboxes. There's two mailboxes in here for a purpose. One is for us to use with our mail forms that we use. Now Paul is specifically sending information from a web form he created and pushed information over by email. Now he's going to speak to that in a separate webinar, so I'm not going to speak to that today. But this is the second mailbox, and this is the one that I sent the email to at ittraining@myissuetrak.com. The idea here is that you can have as many mailboxes as you want. I've had customers as many as 15, 16, even up to 100 mailboxes, depending on what they needed to do. Each mailbox having a separate purpose. For example, if I have a facility issue, I send it to a facilities mailbox. If I have an IT issue, I send it to an IT mailbox. I even have some customers that create mailboxes that are for business purposes. So big customer, customer A, representing 50% of my business that I do. I keep him happy. If I don't keep him happy, I shut my doors. So I have a dedicated team of people that handles anything having to do with customer A. So we create an incoming email that's specifically for customer A. Any customer A issues goes into that mailbox and creates issues for it. We route those issues directly to the customer A response team, who's responsible for keeping customer A happy. So we can dedicate a mailbox for customer support as well as for general issue tracking. So it just depends on how you want to process and use your mailboxes. Remember, these are your mailboxes. These are not Issuetrak mailboxes. These are mailboxes that you own and that you have access to. Now, what does that mean? So let's take a look here at the first part of our mailbox service. Here's where we define our connection to whatever mail service we're going to use. Now, we can use an Exchange service, an IMAP, or a POP3 service in order to connect to that mailbox. So these are different profiles. For example, if you use an Exchange email, Outlook, for example, it's probably going to be Exchange. If you're using something in the cloud, you might be using Gmail, for example. That's normally going to be IMAP. And then POP3 is one of the oldest ones that's out there. So you'll find POP3 mails maybe in a Yahoo account. So it just depends on what you're using as your mailbox. Then you have a connection server, and you can even use TLS encryption on that communications just to keep things secure. Then, of course, you provide the account ID, and of course, there's no password here because it's plain. We've kind of interpreted that, so the password to connect. Because, of course, if we're going to read information into the mailbox, we've got to have access to that mailbox. Now, the other thing is the return address. Now, we can put an address in here that says, okay, when you send email in, then we're going to reply back with that email address. So if it happens to be a facilities mailbox, it's a facilities@myissuetrak.com. If it happens to be IT, it's IT@myissuetrak.com. If it happens to be HR or whatever it happens to be. What it's important to understand is if you send email into a mailbox, we're going to reply back, and that doesn't matter whether it's by email or updates to the issues. We're going to reply back to information related to that issue as it came through the facilities mailbox. If you write it through IT mailbox, all communications back about those issues are going to come back as IT issues because it's going to use a return address from the mailbox it's sourced from. So that's important to understand. It's also nice to know because if you're doing something like that customer A mailbox, then you want them to know that they're being handled by the customer A response team mailbox, mail address, not an individual, a group, essentially. Now, so let's move on to the next thing we're going to do. How do we categorize that issue? Now, remember, we went ahead and put this issue in using this information, MFG complaint. Oh, what's that telling me? Well, let's take a look. I'm going to go back up and open this up because I'm going to stay on that other site. And I'm going to go back to my site that I'm working with today. And I want to take a look at my quick pick list. Because what we're trying to do here, if you notice, is we're either going to apply a quick pick or we're going to apply an issue type. Well, because the issue that I created has task on it, and it has things like the class associated, then I've got a good suspicion that this was created from a quick pick match. So I go back in here and I say, okay, so the quick pick says if the email subject contains a quick pick name. So let's take a look. Here's my quick pick list. I'm in administration, quick picks. And if I scroll down to MFGs, I see that there's one in here called, let's see, quality complaint. And if I go back to the email, it says quality complaint. So what happened was the email system matched the name of the quick pick is being contained within the subject line, and it applies the matching quick pick. Now, you can make it match exactly, or you can have it look for being contained, and I usually recommend contained. You know, contained is information that says, okay, it's in there. It can have other stuff. Like I have a MFG quality complaint about blah, 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 blah. Well, all the blah, blah, blah is just extra stuff. I'm just looking for that one little match. Now, you can also match not only by quick pick, but you can just set up an issue type. So what would I be doing in the issue type list? If I go back to my list and I come back to my issue types, and I'm going to go expanded list, and I can go in here and look at anything having to do with an issue type or subtype. And if these are contained within the subject line, remember, issue type, subtype. So if finance service is in there, it's going to submit the issue as being a customer service dash complaints under finance services. So it's going to have the issue type and the subtype. So it'll have that filled in. In this one, the quick pick filled in the issue type. 94, excuse me, wrong one. The quick pick filled in the issue type. It didn't have a subtype. If I was using a match by the issue type, it could potentially have a subtype and an issue type. So it just depends on how it was sourced. So that's important, again, important information. So now you understand that both the quick pick or the issue type can be categorizing your issue. Now, also an important thing to understand about the quick pick. We have this capability here that says use the following quick pick for every email process. Well, what's important about that? Let's say that a facilities issue, no matter what, needs to be routed to the facilities manager, or it needs to be managed to the facilities team, and it needs to be reviewed and then assessed and then sent out to whoever it needs to be handling it. Well, that's the same thing in IT. Well, we've got to go ahead and we'll assign it to the team. They'll take a look at it. Or you may have one that's going to a legal team and you want to go ahead and route that issue. Well, it could go ahead and be assigned to the IT service team and then tasked to another team. As you saw with the issue that I created, because of that, the way that quick pick was used, it automatically routed things according to the tasks that were added. Well, if you use a quick pick for every issue that's being created through a mailbox, it's going to use that quick pick to route that issue out. And it's a good tool to use whenever you want to do that type of routing. So use it as a tool for you. Use it to your advantage so you can go ahead and use a quick pick in here for this particular issue. So it's going to have this structure. That issue will have this structure. If it happens to be, let's say, an engineering change request, it needs to go to the ECR team first to review it. So we want that to go ahead and go into that process. Same company may have an HR issue. It needs to route to the HR team. So we want to make sure that everything going into that mailbox routes appropriately. So no matter what, anything comes up in the issue type, if you send it to HR, it's going to HR. Now, that gives you that ability to do routing just by the quick pick. But however, we do have additional things that we can do it. For example, we can go ahead and run our automatic business rules. So our business rules in here, of course, give you the ability to create things like auto assignments. And the auto assignments is depending a lot of times about things that have already been derived from that issue. For example, the processing did the issue type or subtypes. It processed the location or it processed an organization, and it routes the issue according to the combination of informations because it's coming from the business rules. So we're looking at the business rules also being able to send an issue to a particular team. Now, that doesn't always work. So what we like to do sometimes is we'll come back in here and define an issue type and a default assignment on here. So that if it falls through all the cracks, go ahead and send it to this team. Or if it falls through all the cracks, put this issue type in it. So, or you can say it falls through all the cracks, just let it go to the unassigned queue. So it may have a default type, which it will have, it's required. And then it's going to also go ahead and then just leave it as an unassigned issue. So it makes it nice that it can go ahead and do that, because that way nothing is left behind. Now, let's talk a little bit about that submitting user. Now, email addresses, depending on how you use the software. So we have some customers that are internal only. They know all their users are within our user table. Well, then they're more likely going to accept email from existing users. They're going to use this option right here. So that means that they know everybody. Oh, or by the way, they've also got Active Directory. So if they're not in the user table already, they're in the Active Directory. Well, the incoming email module is smart enough to ping both. Check the user table. If you don't find it there, pick the Active Directory. So it finds a user, adds the user if it's being found in the Active Directory and not in the user table. Now, it's also smart enough to say, well, what happens if I don't match here? Well, then you tell me what I want to do. I can go ahead and submit this particular issue underneath a template user or a clone issue, whatever. You want to have a user that you want to submit this under. So it could be example issue, test user, this user, whatever it happens to be. And then when you do that, then it'll just take the information of the email address that it was sent from and put that into the description of the issue. So you still know who it came from. Or, and this is really important for things like customer service. A lot of times when you're dealing with customer service, you're dealing with complaints from people that you may never have to deal with again. Let's say you happen to be a manufacturer for a frozen drink and it's sold to people everywhere in the country. You don't know who it's been sold to, but they want to lodge a complaint. You tell them to send it to this email address. Well, you can just make a decision at that point. I'm just going to go ahead and use the submit as this issue as just being someone, or I want to be very personal with this person and say, okay, I want to create a user account for you. So that when I add notes to the issues, it's going to go ahead and be sent directly to you. So all I have to do is stay in one place. I add a note to the issue, and it's being sent to the user that I created. Now, if you happen to have a more tight relationship, let's say that you're a manufacturer and you sell to a specific set of customers, and you would prefer those customers to be able to go ahead and relog back into Issuetrak to check status of issues, then you're more likely to use the option to create users from a template. In that case, what happens is that user then can have rights. And when you have rights, that means you can log into the site. And when you log into the site, that means that, well, I need to be able to set a password. Well, in Issuetrak, you can email login instructions when you create a user this way. So you can send an email to them, say, hey, we've received your email. Here's your issue. Here's your confirmation. Oh, and by the way, here's another email that says, hey, you've created a user for you. Here's your login information. Go to the site, create a password so you can log in and check the status directly in the website. So it gives you an ability to decide how you want to work with that customer. So you could have another option, for example, going back to that juice company. The juice company sits out here. They may, again, they don't want to set it up this particular, but they want an identifiable user because they want to do reports maybe on organizations or locations or something like that. For example, they may decide that what they would like to do is be able to create a user, put them into an organization that determines what company they may have bought the product from. So let's say it was Walmart. So they bought this drink product at Walmart. Well, I'm going to go ahead and every issue submitted in here would go under a Walmart organization. So I'm going to go ahead and set this user up saying he came from Walmart. And then I'm going to say, okay, well, I want to know what area of the country you want. I want to know what state it was in. So it's Virginia, it's North Carolina, it's California, it's Texas, it's Honolulu, who knows what it is. So I know exactly where this product was sold at. So I can pick in information. So this user reported a problem. They bought it at Walmart and they put it into a location that tells me it's what state it's in. So we'll just use Virginia, for example. So you can set that user up so the next time that person sends in an email, then that user then is identified as being a Walmart customer from email. Now you can always change that information because next time they may have bought it at Target, for example. So you don't know. But you can flip the data around if you need to, but it comes in directly from the user account to start with. Now, another little trick that you can use especially when you're dealing with tight customer service, again, with not that general product nationwide, but more along that lines where, again, you're maybe a software developer and you're dealing with a corporate company like Issuetrak. Well, then I can attempt to determine the organization from an email domain. And what does that mean? I can go back in here and I'm going to go to administration and organizations, and I'm going to pick on the Issuetrak organization here. From an organizational perspective, I usually don't know a lot about their users, but I know what email domain they're sending me from. So a company generally has an email domain. Generally, sometimes it's more than one, but in general, you have one email domain. So what happens is anyone in that company is going to send me a problem report or a request for information is going to come from that email domain. So what I can do then is I can recognize that this email domain is being sent to me, and I'll put you into the organization Issuetrak. So it makes it nice. I don't have to go back and reorganize this issue. I don't have to go back and redo this issue because it's using the email domain to determine this new user's organization. So when I create them, the user is going to be in the right organization, and also the issue is going to be in the right organization. So it's a nice tool to use in order to route your issues when you're doing a little bit tighter customer support instead of like a nationwide type thing. So now we've done that. Now, one other thing that's a setting in this particular area is require users to have visibility to add notes. Now, I'm going to talk about replies in a little bit, and I'm going to come back to this feature when I talk about the replies. So this is another setting in this area, but I just want to go ahead and say it's got an effect that's going to talk about something that we do with the issues whenever, or something we do with replies. So I'm going to come back to that. The other thing to remember is that when we create an issue, for example, in this particular case, the email that I sent was only going out to one mailbox, no CC list. However, this particular issue, and I'm going to look at this one, has Issuetrak and Paul Harris. And Paul Harris happens to be a person, of course, he's at Issuetrak. He's my buddy here at Issuetrak. So what happens is I want to keep him involved with this one. He's a CC list member. CC list member. So in CC list, I can include users from email CC list on the user's email distribution list, on the issues distribution list, which means if I go to number 4 or 5 and I scroll down here and I go to view maintain distribution list, I could see Paul Harris has been included on the email distribution list for this issue on submit, on note, and on close. Now, how did that happen? It's because I determined that if you're a member of an email distribution list, I'm going to add you to the issue. And what am I going to do? Only add users from a user table, exactly like I did before, create a user from a template, put a person in here. So I've got 3 of the 4 options that are being used here in order to work issues, just like I did with users. I can send them an email instruction so they can log in, just like, especially on the second option here. And I can attempt to determine their organization from the domain, just like I did before. So I can go ahead and use this capability to create a user for Paul Harris, and then he can then be identified that. Now, word of caution here, remember, this is CC list only. It is not the BCC list. It is not for other users included on the to line. Some people like to include the mailbox assigned to it and 15 other people. And that means that those 15 other people would not be included in this email string. Only someone on the CC list would be included. So I hope that takes you through users. So now you're seeing how you can go ahead and include others in the notifications that's going out about this by adding people to a CC list. Now, let's kind of move forward here. I want to talk a little bit about one thing that you can do. For example, in this particular case, what I would like to do is be able to reply back. So these are the emails that we get back. So you send an email in, you get an email back. In general, that is configurable by you, but it shows you, of course, a link to the issue. It confirms that you've received it. It gives you general information about the issue, and it has a description and possibly other information that's added. That's configurable by the customer So whatever they've decided to set up their Issuetrak site is what they're going to see back. Well, I would like to go ahead and add a note to this issue. But I may or may not have the ability to log in, or I may not feel like logging in. Well, what can I do? I click reply. And when I click reply down in the area here, I can then go ahead and add, this is a note. And if you look here on the drop down for the subject line, it has a particular format that it's using here. See what's highlighted? Pay attention to this area here. Any email that you want to send to this mailbox that has this format, whatever you've added into the body down here at the bottom, usually it's going to be this area here, is going to be added as a note to that issue. Now, there is, you see, it says, please reply above this line. That's an actual key that we use that tells us what we're going to parse and what we're not going to parse. We're going to add into our note anything above here. That's what's going to go into our note. It's above that line. There's a couple of different identifiers that you can see in there, but I wanted to point that out. But I wanted to also point something else to you. If you take a look at this and you'll say, okay, RE : issue pound issue number. This RE, and we'll also do this for FWs, of course, is reply and forward that we see in our standard English language mail programs. Gmail, Outlook, most of them use the same format to send the replies and the forwards. So what we can do is we can recognize that and know that's a reply to an existing email, or that's a forward from an existing email. And then when I go back into Issuetrak, and I'm going to use my little circle with the question mark up here to click into the Help Center, I'm going to do a quick look, and it's going to go into incoming email, and I want to click this overview. Now in this overview, there's some great information about the mailbox itself. So don't be afraid of going into Issuetrak and clicking up here at the top and go to search articles and search for information or things that you don't know about. If it's a feature you decide you want to investigate, go in here and do a search. It'll give you some good information. If you still don't know what you're trying to look for, you still have questions, click on Contact Us. If you click on Contact Us, you'll get a form you can fill out. It'll create an issue in our Issuetrak, in our support system, and our support team will get back in touch with you. Now, the other thing that I want to point out to you is this. You'll notice that this says how to add a note to an existing issue. It says reply back, but it's using these little tags. And these tags, you'll see here's the RE and the FW, but then there's a bunch of other things in here. What are all these tags? These tags are actually used by our international customers who use other programs that are maybe not in English. It could be Outlook for German. It could be Outlook for Spanish. It could be Central America. It could be Australia. Who knows? So we're trying to put in some of the most popular tags that we can find in here to be used to be recognized as replies, so that your customers don't always have to go in and modify the subject line to say it's got to be RE. It doesn't have to be. It can be any one of these additional tags also. So this is good information for you to take a look at. And you can see here that this is a tag. Now, what's nice about this, and kind of a trick that you can use, let's say I want to go back here and I would like to say, I want to go ahead and say, I'm going to copy this out. So I could go back to any email in the string and I can edit the subject. So I'm going to go ahead and forward this. So I'm going to use a forward. And I'm going to come down here and I'm going to modify the subject. So I'm using Gmail. And I'm going to go ahead and copy that in. So I can paste this in here and it does the same thing. That means you can take and forward any email that you want to and send it in and add it as a note to an existing issue. The other thing about this is the attachments capability. Remember, when emails are sent in, if they have an attachments to them, the attachment will be added at the issue is created. Same thing for a note or reply. If you have an attachment on that note or reply, it's going to be added to the attachments of that issue. So it means that maybe I had a form I had to fill out. Well, then I'll attach the form to the email and then reply back. And then when I do that, the new form will be added as an attachment to that issue. So it's a lot of ways of using this particular capability, again, to get data and pull that information back. So good way of doing it. So let's go back and take another look. We're back in a CS training site. We're going to take a look here on this information. So now we've been able to do communications back and forth. We've now processed both issues and replies, and we've created users, and we've added them to CC list if necessary. Another thing we can do with the notes capability is we can even reopen an issue if the note was added after close. Now that means that a person can come back and just reply back with additional data and it can reopen the issue. The problem is that I can't tell the difference between additional data and someone saying thank you. So my suggestion and my best practice is to not check this box. Just allow it to add a note, which will go ahead and send it to the assigned user, and then they can make a decision on whether they would like to reopen the issue or not, or just ignore it. Because people like to be polite. We see a lot of people who are polite and they just say thank you, and that's all they want to do. The other one that's important, and it's something that Paul and I run into, is this notification on error. And I'm getting ready to go into what's called the keyword list. And the keyword list, and even if a user is unknown, is going to bounce the email to a notification group or a notification user. And the person who receives that then is going to determine what to do with it. Well, a lot of times what we do is we see blanks in here. Nobody's been designated for notification. So if an email is bounced for whatever reason, nobody knows about it because it doesn't have anywhere to send it to. So I always recommend that someone be assigned to receive these emails. And they don't have to be an agent. They can be anybody you want. So have them receive them. They'll get these bunch of these emails as unable to process incoming email, and they'll go ahead then and process it through. Now, I'll give you a good example of this. I happen to receive emails from our internal corp site, our internal sites for our internal sales processing stuff that we do. Well, we happen to have this one vendor that happens to want to send their payment information directly into this corp site that's mostly internal, instead of sending it to one of the other finance sites that we have. So I'll get this unable to process incoming email because they're not a member of my Active Directory. So therefore it bounces the email. And so I have to look through all of these emails to look for these payments. So every once in a while, and usually happens about every year, once a year or twice a year, I'll get 2 or 3 of these emails in a row that happen to be POs that are active POs that my finance team may not have even gotten. So I'll forward those emails to the finance team, then let them take care of it and process it. But if I hadn't have looked through there and I hadn't found those, it's very well possible that those particular payments would either not been reached or they would have been delayed, and we'd have been asking them for money when it's already been processed and sent over to us. So it's an important role to have within the Issuetrak management system, is to have someone receiving these emails. So what are the things that we can do to bounce an email? So let's take a look at our keyword list. So on the left-hand side, we have what's called keyword list. So these are the additional settings for your mailboxes. And when you go in here, you can determine 2 different types of keywords. Number 1 is the subject line. So out of office, unable to respond to process this email, whatever it happens to be. You can go in here and put your keyword in here and then make it a subject match. And it can be an exact or contains. Or you can go in here and add an email address. And again, an exact or contains. Now, contains is nice because you can even do something like this. At Microsoft. I don't want anything from that particular email domain to be processed because it's contained. So this is one of the things that we can do, is we can actually use the domain sometimes as a nice way of blocking the information out of here. So it's kind of a tip and trick that you might want to use. Now, another thing we can do is get rid of disclaimers, signatures, or additional information that may be repeated in your issues. It's called essentially our ability to exclude text. For example, this is a disclaimer. So we have a standard Issuetrak disclaimer that we've added to the bottom of our emails, and you don't want to see it anymore. Or you've got a customer that does that, or they've got this big, huge, long, legalistic, confidentiality agreement that has to be in there. So we don't want that in there. So we can strip that out and we'll match that up every time we look. So for example, there's about 5 different options in here. I think it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. This one happens to be a block of content that came over when I added a note to this issue. So in here, here's the information in that my signature actually added. I didn't want to see that anymore, so I stripped it out so that my next reply stripped most of that information out. I didn't have to see all of this anymore. And that's how the exclude text works, is it strips data that is repeated information that's not relevant to the ticket and gets it out of the system. So it's a nice little feature to use. And notice this one's even in French. We were doing some testing with this just to make sure that the special characters were covered, so you can have some capabilities to do that too. Another thing we can do is block attachments. I'm gonna go back to this email, and you'll notice, of course, these little social media icons at the bottom. So what happens a lot of times is these are added as attachments to emails. So you'll see an email processed through Issuetrak, and it has like 5 or 6 of these little attachments. Well, it's usually going to be an image file for each one of these and for this, and these are all attachment files. So this is the logo for corporate Issuetrak. So what I would like to do is I'll go back in here and I'll go back to home and I'll say, you know what? I really don't want those anymore. So what I can do is I'm going to click on this issue here and I'm going to pick on it. So I'm going to go into the attachments and I'm going to look, there's a screenshot in here. So I'm going to do an issue view. And this is usually where I would do it from. You can click up here at the top. You can either download the attachment, you can delete it, or you can block it. If you want to block it, that means that no other emails, no other image files like this is going to come in. For example, I'm going to pick on Twitter. If it happens to be a Twitter image file, then it's going to be a Twitter image file amongst 100 different emails or more. So once you've identified it, we pick a bitmap of it. And the bitmap says, okay, anything that comes across that matches this bitmap, we're going to get rid of. So then we don't have to see it anymore on anything else. It'll continue to block that from that day forward. So it makes it very helpful for you to use in order to clean up your attachments in here and not add things that are essentially not useful for you. So let's move on to the next item in here. So when we're taking a look again, we've got attachments, exclude text, keywords, and I'm going to come up to this one called email tokens. Now, there's certain tokens that I'm going to talk about, and there's certain tokens I'm not going to talk about today. Paul's going to talk about these in a little bit more in detail when he talks about web forms in a separate webinar. So please look up the webinar that Paul did on web forms, and he'll talk about additional usage of tokens. I'm going to specifically speak to the ones like this. These are the action tokens: assignment, next action, priority, substatus, and even closure at the bottom. Essentially what these are doing, these field tokens at the top are allowing you to add a token to an email reply or to the body of an email that allows you to change it, to change the assignment, next action, the priority, substatus. All of those can be added by using this token. Now you can even edit this token so you can change it to something that you want to use. The token itself is this portion right there. And it ends in these double brackets. Actually, it's a little bit further. It's all the way back here. That's the beginning and that's the end. And then this is who the person's going to be assigned to. Down here at the bottom, it's just a command token. It just says close the issue. So if they're at it, it closes the issue by email. You don't have to do anything more than that. Now, after everything is processed, then we have a log file that's created that gives you information about what we've done. So for example, here, these are all the emails that we processed. Now, this is going to be maintained for 3 days. And in some cases, you may have hundreds, if not thousands of emails that are in here because it's 3 days of processing. So you can go through and page and page and page and page, or you can use our filter capability at the top to take a look at a segment of data. So for example, I'm going to go in here and I'm going to pick on the 12th. because this is when the original webinar was done. And I'm going to do a search. And it shows me different options, different emails that were processed across 2 different mailboxes. This is the IT training one. This is the one for mail forms. Well, what I want to do is only process this one. So I'm going to copy this and I'm going to put it to the account ID and I'm going to do the filter again. And now it gets rid of all the mail forms and leaves me with only the ones that I processed earlier. So here is the email that I processed originally. This is this email that I talked about when we began this journey, is this email here. Well, when I go back in here, and here it says 1494, added new issue. Then this tells me when it was received, when it was processed, who it was from, what the subject line was, and then what we did. And if you click here, it'll take you directly to 1494. So it tells you the status, what happened. Every once in a while, you're going to get a message like user not created or something like that, and the email will not process. So that happens. If it has attachments, it'll list the attachments. And then you see where it says retry history. Well, what does that mean? Well, like I said, something happened, this one didn't process. So what I can do is I can filter for it and then check this box and click on retry selection. Let's say we had an email received from someone who didn't have a user account. We created a user account for them and we want to just process the email from them. Well, we can do that. All you have to do is go in and check this. And if you want to check multiples, you'll see this is going to allow you to pre-process multiple items. We've had situations occur where we maybe had problems processing and we need to reprocess some emails that we wrote, or we weren't able to access the mailbox for whatever reason for a while, and we wanted to go back through and reprocess things. So we would do that. So it gives you the ability to do that. But this is a nice filter. It gives you a good capability of looking for data through the log file. You do have to be quick because remember, you only have 3 days. So after that, it's going to go away. Now, if there are any other questions or anything that has to do with incoming email, you can always contact the support team. They're happy to answer any question that you want. If they don't know the answer, they will reroute that question either to the support team, to the professional services team, myself and Paul, or even to anybody else within the company that can help you out with whatever question you have. So always go to the support team as being your first relationship. Like I said, when I was talking to you a little bit, the contact us form is going to create an issue in Issuetrak for you to look at. Another couple things I just want to point out real quickly is down here at the bottom. When you go to this contact us form, there's a couple of things that's really interesting. Down at the bottom, there's a product roadmap. So you can click on the product roadmap and you can see what's coming up in Issuetrak. I can get it to render here. But what we're doing is we like to present you with information about what's coming. And if you look down here at the bottom, it's October, November, December, and beyond. Well, almost through, we've done through October, we're almost through November, and we're coming into December. So you're seeing these releases come out from Issuetrak that are giving you these features that are being added within the software. And these are the things that we're looking at for the future. So those are in our roadmap for later additions into Issuetrak. Nice way to keep up. Also at the bottom of this list, there's another one down here that says release notes. Now I want to pick out release notes before I come down to the other one. Sometimes people don't know what's in a release. This is going to give you the latest release notes from Issuetrak. Now, there is a history of release notes that's in the support site. You can always go back and get those now. And as you see, you can even sign up for Issuetrak release announcements and subscribe there. So you can even get an email when they're coming out. Another thing you can do is give us a feedback. Now, on the feedbacks, and I'm going to hit back here and go back on this particular one and come back to the roadmap. Go to the product feedback here. And when you get down to product feedback, this is a form that we've created to give you the ability to update information. Essentially, what you can do is you can go ahead and contact us and say, okay, I'd like to change this about Issuetrak. I have an idea. Go ahead and use this. Use this in here for first name, last name, company name. You can put an area where it is in here and put a description. Please make sure you put an email and a phone number in here. Sometimes nobody no matter how good you are in describing a feature and trying to sell it to us, you can't do it through this little description. And remember, you can pop this out and get more information and slide it down so you can read it a little bit more. But you can go in here and put information in here, but we may not understand exactly what you want or understand the urgency that you need. So our team, and it's mostly going to be John, is going to be, has a capability to reach out if you provide you with contact information. You provide the contact information, I can reach back out to you and then see exactly what you're talking about. So John can understand what's going on as the product owner. And then he can make suggestions to leadership to add a new feature or not based off of some of the feedback that he gets. So it's very important to provide as much information as possible on this page. So if you have an issue, if you haven't understood everything in here, again, please come back and reach out. I hope you've enjoyed spending a little time with me. I hope I haven't been put too many of you to sleep, but hopefully you can get some good information that you can use. Again, if you need us, go ahead and reach out to us. ProServices@Issuetrak.com, support@Issuetrak.com. Reach out with our phone numbers, 757-213-1351 for support and 757-213-1330 for the PS team. So until next time, have a good day and we'll talk to you next month.